In your opinion and in your experience, because this is the world that you kind of dwell in, helping people understand stewardship and what it means to be a good manager of God's resources, in your opinion, is there ever a time that debt is actually valid, or do you always avoid it every time at all costs?
Well, debt is undesirable always compared to not having debt, obviously. If you have the choice, you don't want debt. But if you must have a debt, hold your nose and limit it to these three things.
All right, I've got a pen out because I want to know what these are.
Number one of the three things that debt becomes valid if you have to is getting an education.
Okay.
Number two is building a business.
Okay.
And number three is buying a house. Now, those three things have one thing in common, and that is that every one of them pay back an increased value. An education, of course, provides you with more opportunity, and on average, studies show that that those with higher education do get higher wages. Not always true, but on average.
Right.
A business, to finance your business or build your business, ends up with a greater market share. Oftentimes, that's you get higher profits and that sort of thing, so it pays you back more. And then a house. Here in the United States, at any rate, you get to ride what I call the escalator of appreciation, where you're really standing still,
right?
But you're going upward and forward during that whole time. So owning a house is much like an escalator of appreciation, where you're doing nothing, but the house is getting worth more and more all the time.
Well, other than one exception in my lifetime, 2008, it all came out from underneath me. Unfortunately,
Yes.
I got out. I lost $1,000 at the end when I sold the house, which I felt like I had skated.
Yes. And there are times, as you point out, 2008, and there are neighborhoods, there are isolated pockets, but in general, houses and property will appreciate in value.
So like if we were to look over the last 100 years, the vast majority of time, owning a home was beneficial.
Yes, and it did pay back more than you ended up putting into it. So that's why home ownership is part of it. Notice that not on the list is anything that depreciates instead of appreciates, which would be a car. That's the conspicuous one that's absent from that list is a car.
Right.
And I can hear a lot of people now saying, well, no, wait a minute. There's no way to buy a car without going into debt. Well,
there is, though.
Yeah,
Isn't there?
There should be.
Yeah.
According to these parameters that we're setting down, that it must be an appreciating asset in order to go in debt for it. Car is not on that list. Vacation obviously is not on that list. Furniture. Most investments. Now, there are investments that do end up...
we're going to step on some toes here.
Yeah.
But going into debt for the investment is what you're talking about.
That's the issue. And the reason being that most investments are risky. And so you can't come out guaranteeing. Now, some real estate, some things like that, if you're investing in that, then it's justifiable. But stock market and those sorts of things, you certainly would not want to go into debt for, at least according to my definition.
Well, anything that's too good to be true is too good to be true. And so if you get a hot stock tip and you borrow, let's say I'm going to borrow $50,000 and buy that stock because it's going to go up 100-fold. No, history says it's not.
Yeah,
it's not going to go up 100-fold. And more people lose than win on that. And I'm not speaking against investing in stocks necessarily, but I think you're right. If you're borrowing money, let me go back.
There's a risk involved.
Yeah, let me go back to the car one for half a second, because my dad actually sold cars. And I don't remember if we talked about this last time, but he sat me down and he said, son, let me show you what people make on the financing versus what they make on the car. And the profit margin on a new car isn't all that high. And then his next piece of advice, selling new cars, he told me, don't buy a new one, buy a good used car. And make yourself a car payment every month until you have the cash. Walk to work, ride a bicycle, do what it takes until you have the cash for your first car. So I did that, and I've never had a car payment my whole life because of it. Now, the first car was awfully humble.
Right.
It needed a head gasket, and I had to fix it and stuff. But now I'm crossing the 50 mark, and I've never had a car payment.
Yeah.
And most salesmen are aghast, especially when you're 25 and you walk in saying, no, I'll be paying for the car in cash. It is possible. I guess I'm throwing that in there to say it is possible. You can do it, but you need to lower your expectations. You
don't buy your dream car cash as your first car, that's for sure.
No.
When I was in high school, any girl that went out with me knew that there was a pretty good likelihood she was going to end up pushing a car sometime during the evening. And I had to kickstart those suckers with a clutch and all that sort of stuff. And you don't start off on with your dream car, but you start off humbly and, like you say, put aside money, have a little what they call a sinking fund. To where you prepay, and then when it comes time, pay cash.
And it's amazing. I drive cars till they're dead. I don't know how great of advice that is, but I drive them 10 to 13, 14 years. And you actually saw my wife's car when it finally hobbled off at the end of its life. But that's lots of time. 10 years making a regular car payment to yourself will put cash in the bank for a decent car in 10 years.
And it saves you thousands upon thousands of dollars for interest payments.
Yeah, it sure does.